Hi guys, Andrew here with headphones.com. Welcome to the Headphone Show, and today I want to do things a little bit differently and just talk to you guys a little bit about what has been one of my favorite products of the last year, and I didn't really get a chance to talk about it. This sort of fell through the cracks just because I had so much other stuff that I wanted to talk about. But this is going to be a video on the Soncoz LA-QXD1 balanced DAC, and it comes in right at around $220. Now, again, this is not going to be my usual structure, mainly because the focus is typically being with headphones. But it is also worth evaluating DACs and amps and all the rest of this stuff. It's just that I don't really get to do it all that much. So I'm just going to sort of give you my thoughts on the Soncoz balanced LA-QXD1 DAC. And just as a disclaimer here before getting into the video, this was sent to me by Hi-Fi Go for evaluation, but of course I wasn't paid to say anything about it, and all thoughts and opinions are my own. And yeah, big thanks to Hi-Fi Go for sending this along. But actually, on that note, I gotta mention that like a lot of the time folks will send me stuff at the more budget and entry-level price tags, and I don't really expect that much from them. But then every once in a while something like this shows up where I'm kind of blown away at, well, basically the completeness of the product. Its simplicity, effectiveness, excellence in a small, convenient form factor. And it also looks great. So let's talk about that first, actually. So this is an aluminum housing here for it. It has rubber feet on the bottom along with some vents as well, which is nice because it does get a little warm. And then it's got these sort of buttons on the front, it says Soncoz on the top. And then it's got a bunch of outputs in the back. Now, I'll talk about the outputs here. It's got two balanced outputs, of course, left and right. Right and left, and it's got single-ended outputs here, coax as well, and then it's also got USB here for the data, and then USB for the power. That's interesting. We'll talk about that, but this also has the optical in, which of course may be important for anybody wanting to run this single-ended, and you have an amplifier that maybe there's some background hiss or anything like that. A lot of people will use the optical instead of USB because USB is, well, to be honest, not the greatest. But as far as the bandwidth, yes, I'm aware USB is actually better, but that's not what we're talking about here. There's other issues too, like ground loops and stuff like that, in which case you would run it balanced and then you'd avoid all those problems. So when it comes to the balanced DAC portion, in my opinion, that is kind of like the big win here, right? If you're looking for something to pair with a balanced amplifier with XLR ins, you would use the XLR outs here and then hook it up like that. And as an example, I've been using the Cayenne IHA6 with this, and sure enough, it is dead quiet, no noise floor whatsoever when you're using the balanced outputs here. Lastly, as I mentioned, it does have USB power, which is it's USB-C here for the input, and it's 5 volt here. And so what that means is that no, you won't be able to just run this just with one USB cable here, straight off of the USB, like some other DACs you can do that with. But you will actually need to plug 2 USB cables into your computer to run it. It will run it and power it. Or what a lot of people do is they'll just use a phone adapter plug thing, and you can just plug it into that and it works great. Now, as far as the front buttons here, this is your input selector here. So you got it's coax, USB, and then this one is also a Toslink, and the different buttons light up telling you which is which, or which one is on. And so you just cycle through it by tapping this here. Then you got your volume minus and plus here, and again the lights light up when you do that, and then of course your mute button as well. One other thing to note here is that this DAC does have a bunch of filters in here, which in my opinion is never like the most important thing. The difference is so minimal among all the different filters that I bet that most people probably wouldn't get that on a blind test. But if you do want to mess with filters and change some of them, you want to hold down this button here, and then basically it'll cycle through a number of different options, and then the lights light up, and that tells you which ones are which. So if you're curious about that, I'll leave a link in the description where you can see which lights correspond to which filter. But for me, the filters don't make a huge difference. Now, as far as the rest of the unit is concerned, the biggest thing that I love about this is that it's the form factor here. This is the perfect device for somebody looking for a small footprint setup, but still wants a proper full-size desktop setup. And for me, I've been using this with, again, my Cayenne IHA6 here, which is a fairly large and powerful amplifier, but you could use this with something that makes a little bit more sense for the size of this. But I've just sort of been having it hang out on top here, and it actually works great and it looks great. especially if you get some shorter XLR cables here for the balanced, and it helps kind of keep that whole, footprint desk area clean. So love that. And we'll talk about the sound here in a sec, but really that is the thing that makes this stand out above the rest, in my opinion. It's the no nonsense aspect of it. It's the sort of like, I'm doing one job very well kind of a approach to it. And I really like that. But now let's talk about the sound. And this does use the ESS based chip. Now, again, I've covered the landscape of, these off the shelf DAC chips in the past, but basically it used to be the case that people would avoid the ESS-based chips because they tended to sound a little bit glaring or grating. And I think it's been fairly well understood now at this point that that is due to intermodulation distortion or an intermodulation distortion feature. And then this would come across as, a little bit grating and glaring there. And this is why all you have to do is Google, ESS glare or Sabre glare, and you get a lot of people sort of talking about that. And for this reason, a lot of people, myself included, back a couple of years ago, would prefer to go with AKM or Burr Brown based DACs because they were a little bit smoother there and they didn't have that same sort of bite to them. Now, my opinion on that has totally flipped ever since hearing the Matrix X Sabre Pro DAC, which is the one that I use as sort of my the reference DAC, and that's a very expensive DAC. And then in this last year, I've listened to a number of ESS-based DACs that also use the ES9038Q2M chip or the ES9038 variant chips. And there have been a number of them that don't have any of the IMD hump issues or that sort of glare or bite quality that I was used to with Sabre DACs. So my opinion has definitely changed. So as an example, the SMSL SU9 was a fantastic DAC that didn't have any of these problems, and it came very close to the sound of the Matrix X Sabre Pro that I normally use, which is a very detailed, slightly forward yet still smooth presentation. And then now we have the Soncoz LA-QXD1. I hope I got the order of the letters right. I could be wrong about that. But yeah, the LA-QXD1 is doing that same kind of thing, just stripped down. So just without all those other features like the Bluetooth, like the screen display thing, like the tube modes and stuff like that the SU9 has. And so really, again, this speaks to that sort of no nonsense kind of character. It's supposed to do one thing and it does it really, really, really well. Now, that's basically all I really have to say about this DAC, other than, again, I'm just so surprised at how much I enjoyed this and how much I enjoy using it. To give you an example, I use the X Sabre Pro back there and have that hooked up to the SPL Phonitor X. That kind of ends up being the solid state option there for certain dynamic driver headphones like the Sennheiser HD650 that do really well off of that. And then that's also hooked up to the Amps & Sound Kenzie that I have on the shelf there, which is, of course, it's a very high-end tube amplifier and it sounds amazing. And I'll do a review on that pretty soon, actually. But that's also meant that, my IHA6 over here, which I normally use for planar magnetic headphones, especially the balanced out, it hasn't really had any sort of input source that I could use with it. I mean, I have some around, but nothing that really paired with it all that well that was balanced. And that's really where I've been using this the most. And I gotta say, I am really, really impressed with the sound quality and the form factor and the simplicity of it all, as I mentioned. That this is, again, one of the easiest products for me to recommend, especially at the $220 price tag. It's actually amazing how inexpensive this is. But it makes sense, right? I mean, you take the SMSL SU9 and you strip away a lot of the features there. And if you're wondering, well, what would be the price tag of something like that? Well, I think this is the answer. Now, the other balanced budget DAC, budget balanced DAC, you know what I mean, to look at, to consider as an alternative to this would be the Shit Audio Modius. Now, I haven't heard that one. I'm hopeful to get one in at some point, but a lot of people are doing that sort of Modius Magnius stack there, and it seems to be fairly popular. But the one thing that I do want to say that the Soncoz wins out on, in my opinion, is, again, the form factor, the compact nature of this device. So I think if I were to point to a downside with the Soncoz LA-QXD1, it's that you don't have a matching amp to go with this to have a stack like you would with the Magnius and the Modius. And I think that's really the only drawback here, that it's basically up to you to find something that kind of fits with this in terms of form factor and aesthetic. But like I said, I mean, it works great with the IHA6, which is it takes up much more space on my desk. So when it comes to amp pairings, I really do think this is the all you really need option for something like the Kion IHA6 or really any balanced solid state amplifier. Now you can use this single-ended, of course, with a tube amplifier or other single-ended amplifier. It would work just fine. But in my opinion, the real benefit of this is the balanced outputs here. And that's really why you pay the extra money to get this over something like a standard Shure Audio Modi. But really, that's going to be my conclusion here. The Soncoz LA-QXD1 is such an easy product for me to recommend that I think this is well, it's not a no-brainer because you'd have to choose between this and the Modius if you're looking for that kind of thing. But this is a strong candidate for, the best budget balanced DAC out there. So thumbs up from me. Anyways, that does it for this video. Thanks for taking the time to watch it, and I will see you guys in the next one. Oh, and let me know what you think of this new microphone, and does it sound okay? I had a few problems with the other one. It was just picking up a little too much room tone, I think, and it didn't quite work for my setup here. But yeah, let me know what you guys think, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.